Welcome to our special series, Truth Tellers, where we celebrate people who are out there speaking the truth, which is harder than it should be. Our guest today is really going to piss off the teachers' unions. It's Corey DeAngelis. He is an advocate for school choice. His stated mission right now is the downfall of the teachers' unions. He thinks they have far too much power in the United States and in places like Washington State, which they do. The Washington Education Association is no doubt the most powerful political force in the state of Washington right now. And at the same time, we're just not having the academic outcomes that we should be seeing in our public schools. So what are they really focused on? What is their real mission if it's not educating our children? It really makes you think. Enjoy our conversation with truth teller Corey DeAngelis. Corey, welcome to Truth Tellers.
Hey, thanks for having me.
We honor each year some special truth tellers. And I heard that you're putting a posse together to dismantle the teachers union. And all I want to know is, can I be a part of it?
Absolutely. Join the club.
I want to know what that entails.
Well, you basically have to be here and chat with us. And I think you're part of the club already, so we'll take it. But yeah, as far as dismantling the teachers unions, there's a two-pronged approach to make that happen. And the first one's obvious, and it's something I've been fighting for a very long time, which is school choice, having the money follow the child, allow families to take their child's taxpayer-funded education dollars to the school that works best for them. That could be the public school. If you like your public school, you can keep your public school for real this time, unlike with your doctor. Yeah. But if not, that funding follows the decision of the parent to a private school, charter school, or a home-based education option. And a lot of families are homeschooling in record numbers. It's doubled since pre-pandemic levels, since 2019. And there's been a mass exodus already from the government school system. There's been over 1 million kids that have left government-run schools since 2019. And that's one way to do it. You can incentivize the monopoly to do a better job by empowering parents so that next time when the school board doesn't like what the parent is saying, they won't cut their mic off. They won't call them a domestic terrorist like we saw during the Biden administration. When you have school choice, parents have more agency. The school board's more likely to listen to you, treat you as a customer as opposed to an enemy. And that gives families they're less likely to have to exercise that choice when they have more power. And that improves the public schools. Competition's a rising tide that lifts all boats. And the second prong of the approach is to have teachers dismantle the union from within. Because there was a 2018 Supreme Court case that not a lot of people remember. It's called the Janus decision, which means that unions can no longer compel public school teachers to pay dues because otherwise that would violate their First Amendment rights. Because they're basically, before they were forcing them to fund political causes that they inherently disagreed with. So now teachers are basically en masse being convinced by some organizations like Teacher Freedom Alliance, for example. They've already convinced over 2,000 teachers just this month alone to stop paying the union dues that ultimately go to Democrat campaign coffers that are money laundering operations. The teachers union is a money laundering operation more than an educational institution for the Democrat Party. It ought to be illegal, but now the teachers are fighting back from within because people like Randi Weingarten, Becky Pringle, they don't represent your everyday teachers. I mean, in fact, there's a Education Week survey that I saw recently that showed that only 41% of teachers identify as Democrats, whereas 99% of their dues funding goes to Democrat politicians when it comes to the political arm. So that's the way we dismantle the teachers union. We hit them where it hurts and incentivize them to do a better job.
Yeah, and we'll get into that and kind of what's happening with education in Washington State and some West Coast. How'd you get into this?
Yeah,
because you're like at least public enemy. If you're not one of Randi, you're at least number two.
I'm 1, 2, or 3. So Randi Weingarten had her annual convention this year in D.C., but last year she kind of overplayed her hand in a lot of ways during COVID. But during that convention speech, her keynote, she had on the screen behind her 3 primary enemies. Guess who was included on the list? Were you? I was one of them. Chris Rufo was the other, and Betsy DeVos. It was the triumvirate right there. Her main 3 targets that she put on the screen right behind her. So you can check that out afterwards. But she also had her new book come out, and I wish I had my copy. It's in my room. But mine's called The Parent.
Please don't tell me you didn't give her any money.
I did not give her any money. I dedicated the book to her because she's inadvertently done more to advance school choice and homeschooling than anyone could have ever imagined.
Yeah.
My book's called The Parent Revolution, and it has this, red and blue and color scheme. She just came out with her book. It looks exactly the same. The cover's the same font, the same color scheme. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what's going on. She gave me a nod back, I guess. And her title is Why Fascists Fear Teachers. So she's calling parents fascists, I guess. Yeah. Fascists don't fear teachers. They use teachers to advance their political agendas. We've seen this historically. If anything, her organization is more aligned with the fascists. Mussolini wanted the state control of education. Why? So that he could have a monopoly on information so that young, impressionable minds would think that his authoritarian policies were the right way to go. I mean, fascists, by definition, like centralized power and authoritarianism, and that's what the teachers' unions want too. That's why they want a single Department of Education. That's so that they can lobby one institution to get what they want, as opposed to having to lobby every single 50 state Department of Education. They can do it in one fell swoop, control not just the blue states, but the red states too. And we saw this during COVID. Randi Weingarten's union lobbied the CDC, of all things, to make it more difficult to reopen schools in person. They held children's education hostage to secure billions of dollars in ransom payments from taxpayers. They got $190 billion since March of 2020 in so-called COVID relief that wasn't even used to open the schools. It was used to hire more people, more Democrat foot soldiers to push for their political pet projects, to give them more union dues, to funnel towards Democrat campaign coffers and not towards education. We saw in the NEA, the largest teachers union in the country, they just had their annual convention. Well, one of their members leaked the resolutions to me because they used to make them public. They have them private now because sunlight is the best disinfectant. Mm-hmm. Once we started to expose what they were doing to little cockroaches, they scurry with any form of transparency whatsoever. In 2019, they had a resolution at their annual convention. It was pretty simple. I thought it was going to pass easily. Anybody would have thought it would pass. It was a resolution to rededicate themselves to being about student learning. The teachers union should be all for this, right? They defeated that resolution. It went down in flames. And then this year, I exposed them on X. None of them had to do with education. Mm-hmm. Everything sounded more like a declaration of war on the Trump administration than anything else. They had one of their resolutions. They passed it. And they dedicated thousands of dollars to basically call Trump a fascist. Yep. And in that resolution, they misspelled the word fascism. You almost can't make it up.
I saw that, and I'm so glad you got a hold of some of those things, because again, if it's not happening publicly, how did you get interested and involved in trying to improve our nation's educational outcomes?
Yeah, so I actually experienced school choice growing up in a limited form. I went to government school, so that's why I didn't directly answer your question. I actually forgot the question that you asked, but I went to government school, so if I make any mistakes on this podcast, that's why.
Perfect.
But in high school, I went to something called a magnet school. Yep. Which a lot of states have, these red states and blue states. And they're a form of school choice. I'd say one of the most milquetoast versions, because it's you can have choice, but as long as it's a school that's also run by the government. You're not assigned to it, though, so the school doesn't have as much monopoly power. They have to attract their clientele. They can have their own admissions processes. They can have specialized missions. Mine was in communication. And I felt like that was a good opportunity for me. I think other families should have those opportunities as well, because it was also on the campus, the physical location of my assigned government-run school. That one it was a night and day difference. They had fights every day. There was gangs, there was drugs. In my middle school, the cool thing to do was to go get rolled into the gang. If people got beat up in the bathroom, that was like your initiation technique. I don't know if that's a widespread thing or not, but that's what happened on my campus. I had a friend in the neighborhood that went to the public school with me, told me I was walking the wrong way because I didn't walk like I had a limp, like I was shot a few times. So I was walking to the wrong way, right? And so I had a friend try to teach me how to walk like a gangster. That was the cool thing. That was the socially desirable outcome in the public school system. And I just wrote a piece on the FBI report that just came out showing that our school system is more like a prison type situation for too many kids. They're trapped in violent institutions. There was 1.3 million crimes reported by the FBI on school campuses, and it's almost certainly an undercount because they said themselves that only 9,000 law enforcement agencies reported data to the FBI on this topic. Yeah. There are 18,000 of those in the U.S., so that's only, I mean, you extrapolate it out, it might be twice as many crimes as what they actually reported. And so Michael Malice said it best: public schools are prisons for too many kids, and one of the only places where they'll ever experience violence in their lives. And so school choice is one way to get away from that. And it was certainly kind of an escape valve for me too. I got into fights in middle school. That was the thing to do at the public school. That was kind of the way that you showed power, I guess. It was a way to be it was the cool thing to do. And I don't think that's the culture that we want every single child to go through, especially when they're trapped with their abusers. I also reported that the Department of Education, in 2004, they put out a study showing that 1 in 10 kids would be sexually abused by the educators themselves by the time they graduate from high school. You might say that's 20 or so years old. Well, someone just redid the report. Psychology Today talked about the new peer-reviewed study on this, showing just a couple of years ago that, if anything, it's higher now. About 12% of kids reported some form of educator sexual misconduct. We have a sexual abuse epidemic in the public school system today. School choice is one way to get away from your abuser, obviously. It's not a perfect solution, but there's also bills that are being run in state legislatures to clamp down on the problem as well. And one of them is from my home state of Texas. Representative Mitch Little, a Republican, ran a bill, sponsored it, passed it. Abbott signed it this year to abolish immunity for public schools and their employees in sex abuse cases. Why in the world did they have immunity in the first place? And so why did I get into this in the first place? I went off on a tangent again, but I started as a researcher. I did benefit from school choice, but I really got more deeply connected to the issue at the University of Arkansas. I did a PhD in education policy, so I'm a doctor, but I'm not a real doctor. I'm more like a Jill Biden doctor.
Yeah, that's all right. Throw it around anyway. You earned it.
But it's one of the only higher education PhDs that's not like explicitly Marxist. Like, we had a very well balanced department, I will say. My first study there linked the Milwaukee Voucher Program, which started in 1990. We followed the students using the state-mandated evaluation data, student-level data, until they were about 30 years of age, and found all else equal, getting a scholarship to go to a better school in Milwaukee reduced the likelihood of crime later on in life significantly. And since then, there have been 6 peer-reviewed studies on the topic linking school choice to crime reduction. I've done 2 of them, and they've all found the same thing, basically. Different sizes of effects, but more choice, less crime. It shouldn't be very surprising, right? You get a better educational opportunity, you're more likely to get a job, you're less likely to be around gangs and drugs that are in the public school system, you're more likely to have a better peer network that doesn't incentivize that kind of stuff, and you're less likely to end up in the criminal justice system. It's not a very surprising finding to me. But I figured out really quickly that academia was going to be an uphill battle. I've published about 40 peer-reviewed articles on the topic, but I saw it through the peer review process. In that study, it ultimately got published in a journal called Urban Education. We submitted the journal there. It was one of the high-ranked education journals. They rejected it, not because of methodology, but because of ideology. They said, why did you ask this question? And then one of the reviewers even said, I think it's a causal relationship. I buy the methods. But get this. They said in their official review that the reason that they're rejecting it is you didn't ask the right question, and you didn't talk about how the results related to whiteness, structural oppression, and power. And I'm like, what are you even talking about? All I did was lay out the data and the results. I thought that's what you're supposed to do as a researcher, not get your bias into the report. They wanted lefty bias ingrained, and they probably didn't like the result. They probably didn't like school choice. They didn't like the positive finding. And there's this thing called double-blind peer review, which in practice means they know who they're reviewing because your study goes out as a working paper before and your name's attached to it while it's being peer-reviewed in the process at a journal. And you don't know who they are. So if they reject yours for ideological reasons and then accept others, there's no way to hold them accountable for doing that. Wow. It's not public information. It protects them and allows them to stay in their echo chamber. So I went to think tanks, and I'm very happy that I did. I'm rewarded for my ideas as opposed to being punished in the university system. So that's a long-winded answer to the question that you had asked. But now I'm just on this mission to free families from the clutches of the teachers' unions once and for all, and we're finally winning.
You know, I think that the Washington Education Association, without a doubt, is the most powerful entity in the state. In fact, I was doing an interview maybe a couple years ago with the superintendent of public instruction, and I asked, who has more power, you or the teachers' union? And he said, oh, well, me. And then he immediately corrected himself. You could see the fear take over him. And he goes, well, you know, it's a team or whatever. And it was very interesting to see, you know, and if they were doing this and pushing all this nonsense and, you know, funding all sorts of other climate change and stuff, and the educational outcomes were fantastic, I don't know that I'd be as obsessed with it.
Right.
But as you've probably heard, being in the state, you know, and just being up on these things, our test scores are in the toilet. I mean, they're absolutely horrific. So how do we get parents in a blue state like Washington who maybe aren't politically involved, but they do care about education? How do we get them to see that tie between the teachers union, what they push for and focus on, and the failing academic outcomes?
Maybe we should call them government school unions as opposed to teachers unions, because one of the common misconceptions is if you're against teachers unions, you must not like teachers. That's totally incorrect, especially if you look at what the teachers unions do and how they don't represent the will of the teachers. If you look nationwide, at least, the data is similar in Washington state. The spending per student since 1970 has increased by about 170% after adjusting for inflation. Have the outcomes gotten 170% better? No, they haven't. They've gotten worse. And if you look at the teacher salaries over time, over the same period, nationwide, teacher salaries haven't budged. They've only increased by 3%. So the money's going towards administrative bloat, it's going towards political causes, and it's going towards staffing surges, which is good for people like Randi Weingarten, who make over $500,000 a year to fight to close schools, to fight to inject politics into the classroom. And if they have more dues-paying members, that means more people to push for politics, because that means a larger voting bloc. It gives them more power. It means more dues-paying members, which maximizes union revenues. But then you look at the rhetoric of people like Randi jumping up and down at their annual conventions. Becky Pringle elevated one person at their NEA annual convention in Portland, Oregon, earlier this year. And who did they pick? A person from Pennsylvania, Ashley Crossan, who went up on the stage and let the mask slip. What did she say? She said that her job as a teacher of all things was deeply political and always had been. Now, if that's not free advertising for school choice and homeschooling, I don't know what is. And there's just so much crap that the unions are pushing, like gender ideology, divisive concepts like critical race theory. Your everyday parent, they might not even know what the heck this stuff is. A lot of them thought pre-COVID that the public schools were focused on the basics. And if you had an A-rated school, you're probably fine. If your kid was coming home with A's on their report card, a lot of parents weren't activated. They thought things are okay. And these are more likely to be the politically motivated parents who are in the best, so-called public schools that discriminate on the basis of zip code. But now, at least in red states, we live in 50 laboratories of democracy. This is going to help blue states too. They are moving the ball forward on school choice like we've never seen before. Brandi, we're winning so much, I'm almost getting tired of winning.
I'm not.
Because we're not done yet. Because in 2020, we had 0 states with universal school choice. We were banging our head against the wall, getting very minor incremental reform. And now I wish Milton Friedman were alive today to see his ideas finally coming to fruition. We have 18 states with universal school choice. And in Trump's big, beautiful bill, there was a provision for a nationwide school choice program. It was going to go directly to parents in red and blue states alike. But the Democrat-appointed Senate parliamentarian unilaterally ripped it out once it got to the Senate. Ted Cruz and some other heroes fought to get it back in, but there was a catch. Now the Democrat governors get to decide whether they participate or not. I hope Washington's governor does the right thing, but he's a hypocrite on the issue. Yes, he sent his kids to private school. Why shouldn't other people have? But there's some defections on the issue. Josh Shapiro's team says he's considering it in Pennsylvania. Great. He's a Democrat. Yeah. You look at Josh Stein in North Carolina. He's a Democrat. He says he plans to opt North Carolina into the bill. So I think there's this weird catch-22 situation for Democrats right now because, look, they're in bed with the teachers' unions. We already knew that. But there's a new union in town, a new sheriff in town. They're called parents. They're fighting back ever harder than we've ever seen before. They're beating unions at their own game, at least in some more purplish and red states. And so in Washington, one way to do it is you can circumvent the union-controlled legislature by going to the ballot. You get enough signatures. You can put school choice on the ballot directly to the people. You'll have a higher likelihood of winning there. And another thing is we can fight them in the courts. And so there's already a nationwide school choice provision in Washington and in all blue states. It's called there's the federal IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. It's a federal education law. And parents all across the country with kids with special needs are already using this provision that if you're in a public school, they can make the argument that their rights are being violated because they're not meeting their special need in that school. And so parents have won cases. If the district agrees with you, they'll pay for it. But if not, you have to go to a judge. And if you can prove to the judge that your rights being violated, that funding can pay for private school tuition, even in Washington state, but that's only for kids with special needs. And the district has an incentive to say no because they get a lot of money for the special needs kids.
Yeah, we've heard that.
And so who are the parents who are most likely to be able to access this opportunity right now? It's the ones who have the lawyers they can afford to go fight it in court. It's the most advantaged, which, look, I'm all for the most advantaged getting what they can, but we should also have opportunities like that for less advantaged families too. The legislature should do the right thing. They're not going to do it at the moment, but if Republicans run on this issue, I think this is the wedge issue where they can gain votes. And if Democrats are smart, they'll see the Republicans picking up the football on the issue and say, okay, maybe we should listen to our constituents, not just special interest. And we're seeing some of this in other states. You remember that guy in Virginia who said, I don't think parents should be telling, Terry McAuliffe.
Yes.
He said, I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach. It was a bold strategy, Cotton. It didn't work out for him.
Yeah.
And Glenn Youngkin, a Republican in a blue state, won on the issue of education. That was the number 2 issue in the election, second to only the economy, which is a big deal. And he won the education vote by 6 points as a Republican in a bluish state like Virginia that went 10 points to Biden just the year before. So why I bring this up in Virginia is that this is a blueprint for political success, I'd say, especially for Republicans right now, but for Democrats too, because the parents are paying more attention than they ever have before. And so if parents want these options, they need to lock arms with other parents and beat the unions at their own game. And it's going to require some legislators to step up, even if they think they're going to lose and not get the vote the way they want it to go. They need to talk about these things. And there's someone here that I met, Travis Couture. He ran the Education Savings Account School Choice Bill.
He's great. He's great.
And I mentioned earlier that Travis introduced an amendment in a committee that's run by the Democrats to a parental rights bill to try to notify parents immediately if there's a sex abuse scandal at their public school. Guess what the Democrats did?
Reject that.
They killed it on a voice vote. Now, you might say, well, Corey, why would he even do that and fight that issue? He knew he was going to lose, but you got to think about the long game. This is certainly going to be used against those Democrats in future elections. And so even if you're going to lose the battle, fight to win the war. And so you can't just lay down and take it and be destroyed by the unions and the Democrats running the show. You need to fight back. You need to hit them at the flanks. You can hit them through the legal system. You can hit them at the ballot. You can hit them by in the court of public opinion, which is so important these days. The legacy media, the mainstream media, they would have never covered this vote. I made it go viral on social media so people know about it. And so we have tools at our fingertips now, talking about it on podcasts, talking about it with viral social media clips, where I think the Democrats, they're going to have to say, we can't fight this anymore. This is an 80-20 issue that we're losing on. And so for the betterment of society, Republicans need to lead on the issue. It takes one party to lead for the other ones to respond. But Milton Friedman said it best. He said, the way that you change things is not by getting the right people into office. Obviously, that helps if they vote for the right policies. But Milton Friedman famously said that the way that you truly change things is by creating a climate of opinion where it becomes politically profitable for the wrong people to do the right thing. And I think we're getting there on the education front. We're not there completely yet in Washington, but that's the long game that we need to play in order to, and once we win the schools back, this strikes at the root of all the other problems. Why do you think Ma'am Donnie's in first place in New York City, an out-and-out socialist who, by the way, went to private school himself, yet fights against school choice for others? His kindergarten cost over $60,000 a year, and it goes up from there. Talk about champagne socialism at its finest. He even said on a podcast that I ain't going to public school when he was recalling his high school years. And it's because we have millions of kids going to government-controlled institutions that we call schools. I would call them failure factories in too many places. And they're learning that big government's the solution to all their problems on repeat for 13 years of their lives, for 7 hours a day. You strike at the root, you reclaim the schools, we save our country, not just our state.
Yeah, so true. And the Travis Couture example you give is a perfect example, because I don't know if you knew this. So they rejected it on a voice vote, but because you pushed out the clip, others pushed out the clip, this was so hot that you had Democrats coming back to Republicans in a matter of days, begging them to be able to take a vote on that amendment again. And weeks later, they took another vote on the floor. On that, they put it back in the bill. And Travis Couture's amendment actually is law now. But it was because of the public outrage. So you actually probably had a part in that, honestly, in getting that off the ground.
This reminds me of another example in another bluish state, Colorado, right now. And they had a huge problem with parental rights. Parents were pissed. And they were running a bill. They called it like a trans rights bill. But it had all of these things included in it. And usually the name of something is not what you actually get. And so they included in the bill to mandate insurance companies pay for gender-affirming care, sex change surgeries for minors.
Yeah.
The Republicans had a common sense amendment. What did they say in Colorado? Well, let's just have it for adults. Let's back off the kids.
Yep.
Don't ruin the children and mutilate their bodies at a young age with irreversible surgeries. The Democrats killed that amendment. But there was another piece of the bill where they basically were going to take away children from parents if they misgendered their child.
Yeah.
So if you called Johnny, who is a boy, Johnny, instead of their made-up name in fairy tale land, the courts could use that against you in child custody cases. They ultimately took that one out because that blew up all over the media, partially because I was the first one on X to reveal it to the public. So they're on defense, is my point. We got to stay on the offensive, put our foot on the gas, even if we think we're going to lose, because in the end, we might ultimately win.
Yeah. I want to end here because I always try to understand to the best that I can people's motivations. You know, what is driving them to do this? And, you know, for the Randi Weingartens of the world or the WEA leadership, money, I think, you know, the amount of money they have coming in, they get millions and tens of millions of dollars from the state for doing virtually nothing. But for the rank and file of the union, you know, for the regular teachers who are gung-ho about the union, lockstep, what do you think is their motivation? Because they're teachers, right? They have to see that the academic outcomes aren't there. So what do you think is driving the rank and file members of the teachers union who've bought into this stuff?
It's the same reason the parents did not want to fight back at school board meetings pre-COVID. They thought if they stuck their neck out, there was going to be retaliation, which was mostly kind of true. If you're the only person speaking out against the status quo, against the establishment, there's a risk that they're going to come out after you. And so the reason that the parents started to win is partially because of these social media groups, Facebook groups. They've started to realize, I couldn't be on the right side of history. If I lock arms with others like me, the unions are going to be powerless against taking me down and trying to ruin my life. And so when you have that support group, if you will, you're more likely to speak out. And so teachers have thought for a long time that they're going to be ostracized at school if they leave their union, for example. But now we're having this new mass of teachers learning, one, they can't be compelled to pay union dues. Yeah. And even then, even after they learned that, they thought, well, what about the stuff that the union's giving me that's not political? What don't I need that? Don't I need the personal liability insurance? Which, by the way, when the unions provide this, and they charge about $1,000 on average in union dues every year, they don't give you that insurance policy in your name. They give it to it's in the union's name. It's all about the collective, never about the individual. And so when teachers, when the teachers unions go to the bargaining table, what do? They fight for the lowest common denominator. They fight for uniform salary schedules. They fight against merit pay. So what happens? The best teachers say, the hell with this. I'm going to go become an engineer instead of a math teacher. I can make a lot more money with the same skill set. And so you have these perverse incentives baked into the system. But the teachers are now seeing that they can get free liability insurance from groups like the Teacher Freedom Alliance. They're having it covered by donors. Keep their $1,000 in union dues, not fund their political opponents against their will, have their First Amendment rights be protected. And so we don't just need a mass exodus from the schools in terms of customers. And I don't even care if you have school choice and the schools are doing a good job. I don't care if there's a mass exodus or not. No. What we want is a well-educated populace. I don't care about the label, whether it's private or public or homeschool. I tend to think homeschool is the best way to do it, but not every family's going to, figure it out right away. And so every situation is different. There are some parents that they have one kid going to a public school, one kid going to a private school, and the other child, depending on their age, maybe they're homeschooling them. And so it's all about choice, not about coercion. And so for the teachers, they need to hit the unions where it hurts too. And so I think we're finally getting to an escape velocity, if you will, a moment in time where there's no turning back. There's no putting this genie back in the bottle. The parents' eyes have been opened up. Now the teachers' eyes are opening up. We've had a Moms for Liberty for a few years. Now we basically have this teachers union, Teachers for Liberty, that have bubbled up to fight back against the unions, called the Teacher Freedom Alliance. So I think, look, the school choice fight for a long time has been labeled as this parent versus teacher problem, but it's flipped. It's parent and teacher versus the system, because the system, their employer, is what's screwing the teachers right now, and they're not giving them the money. It's going towards the superintendents making more than the president of the United States, making over $400,000 a year. There's more than half a dozen in my home state of Texas making more than the president. Trump takes zero, right? But in statute, he's supposed to be able to get a $400,000 salary. And so the more that we shine a light on the evil deeds of people like Randi Weingart and Becky Pringle, the more we allow the teachers to say, you know what, this isn't for me. I'm going to do something else. I can still be a teacher, but I can either teach in the private sector or I can stay a public school teacher and not fund these political pet projects that I don't care for. And oh, by the way, if we have school choice, I could even start my own micro school. Yeah. There's teachers starting schools, and with 5 to 10 children. Those kids are getting ESAs, the money following the child. Think about it. We spend $20,000 a kid in the public schools. It's more in Washington, but in the U.S., it's high. Yeah, so that's about 60% higher than average private school tuition in this country. And so if the teachers can start their own miniature schools, do the math. If you have 12 students and you're getting $20,000 a kid, that's $240,000 in revenues. You cut out the middleman, you cut out the bloat, you cut out all those fixed costs associated with the buildings, and more of it can go directly not just to the kids, but ultimately to the teacher who's doing most of the work in the public schools anyway. And so we need to be able to send that message not just to the parents who we've already mobilized, but to the employees who are getting the short end of the stick too. And so I think we're on the right side of history. We're firing on all cylinders, and the momentum is on our side. This might be why President Trump won the parent vote by 9 points. He campaigned on abolishing the Department of Education and school choice, and he also won the education vote. And that's nationwide. He won the parent popular vote and the education vote, according to Atlas Intel polling.
And by that, you mean the teacher vote?
When you say people who said
vote?
that education is the most important issue for them. And that never happens. Republicans for decades have had a double-digit deficit against the Democrats on the education issue because the Democrats were always seen as the party to throw more money at the problem, but that's the definition of insanity. That line isn't working anymore. You can't just ask for more money and expect different results. And I mean, just imagine if you were assigned to a grocery store run by the government where you had no recourse and they told you just to complain to the grocery board. What would the grocery board tell you? One, they'd call you a domestic terrorist, maybe. And two, they would cut off your mic, or they would tell you, please just give us more money. We promise we won't have food poisoning anymore. School choice strikes at the root. It allows you to hold these institutions accountable. And we're all on the same side here, teachers and parents. So I think we're ultimately not just going to win in red states, but the blue states as well.
Yeah, the single best thing that could happen for our state on every front, from education to crime, is for maybe not the dismantling of the teachers union, but for the teachers union to lose some of its political stranglehold over the state. Corey, thank you for what you're doing. Honestly, it is making such a big difference in people's lives, and thanks for taking some time to talk to us about it.
Hey, thanks for having me, Brandi.
Loved chatting with Corey. And man, if he can actually make inroads in trying to, if not dismantle the teachers union, at least try to reduce their political power, so many elements of life in places like Washington State will improve dramatically. So we love what Corey's doing and are happy to celebrate him as a truth teller. Kind of going to stick to the education front for our next episode of Truth Tellers, which is airing tomorrow. And we're going to talk to two young women in Washington State who have made their voices heard on the issue of boys and girls sports. So Annalie Wilson and Frances Stout will be joining us on tomorrow's episode of Truth Tellers. We'll see you then.